The summer she stayed. I hadn't been back to that town in 20 years. My children noticed the ocean before I did. "Dad, look," my daughter said from the back seat, pressing her face against the window. The road had just curved over the last hill, and the water opened wide beneath the afternoon sun, blue and restless, stretching to a horizon that seemed too large for the land holding it. My son leaned forward between the seats. "Is that it? The harbor?" "That's it," I said. My voice sounded steady, but something inside my chest had already begun to tighten. The town looked smaller than I remembered. Most places from our youth do. The harbor was still there, though. Rows of wooden docks pushing into the water, fishing boats rocking gently against their ropes. Gulls circled overhead, crying out the same sharp voices I remembered from another life. The smell reached us when we stepped out of the car. Salt, diesel, wet rope. For a moment I just stood there. 20 years ago I had arrived here with a duffel bag, $200, and the certainty that the world was waiting for me somewhere just beyond the next horizon. I was 19, young enough to believe life was just beginning, old enough to believe I understood it. I didn't. "Can we go down there?" my son asked, already pointing toward the docks. "Yeah," I said. "We'll walk down." They ran ahead, laughing, the way children do when the world still feels wide and promising. I followed more slowly, because somewhere in this town lived a memory I had never quite learned how to carry. I came here for the first time for work. A cousin of mine knew someone who needed help unloading fishing boats during the summer. It wasn't glamorous work. You woke before dawn. You hauled crates until your shoulders burned. You smelled like fish by noon. But when you're 19, hard work feels like proof that you're becoming a man. And there was the cafe. It sat right at the edge of the harbor, a narrow building with large windows that looked out over the boats. That's where I met her. Her name was Elisa. She worked behind the counter. I remember the first thing I noticed about her was how calm she seemed. Not quiet, not shy, just calm. The kind of calm that made the rest of the world feel less rushed. She was older than me. I didn't know exactly how much older at the time, but enough that I could feel it in the way she moved and spoke. She had dark hair that she usually tied back when she worked, and eyes that seemed to carry more thought than most people bothered to show. The fishermen liked her. They joked with her. But she never flirted the way some of the other waitresses did. She had a quiet confidence that made people behave differently around her. The first time we talked, I'd come in after a morning shift, tired and hungry. She poured my coffee without asking. "You're new," she said. "Yeah. Summer job?" "Something like that." She smiled faintly. "Let me guess," she said. "You thought it would be more glamorous than unloading fish." I laughed. That was how it started. The conversations grew slowly. Coffee refills. A few minutes here and there. Sometimes I stayed after the other fishermen left, just talking while she wiped down tables. She asked questions most people didn't bother asking. Where I grew up. What I wanted to do with my life. What I believed about things that didn't have simple answers. When you're 19, you don't realize how rare it is when someone actually listens. She listened. Not politely, not patiently, but with real curiosity. One night after her shift ended, we walked along the harbor together. That became our habit. After the cafe closed, we would wander down toward the water. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. The boats creaked softly in the dark, ropes pulling against the docks with the slow rhythm of the tide. There were nights we sat on the beach with cheap sandwiches and watched the moon stretch a silver path across the ocean. Those 3 months felt larger than the rest of my life at the time. When you're 19, love feels like discovery, like stepping into a room you didn't know existed, and suddenly the air is brighter, warmer, full of possibility. There were things about Elisa that I never fully understood. She rarely talked about her past. If I asked about family, she would smile gently and change the subject. Sometimes she disappeared for a day or two. The cafe owner would say she had taken time off. Then she would return like nothing had happened. But when you're 19, mystery feels romantic instead of concerning. And I didn't want to ask questions that might break whatever fragile magic had found us. The summer moved quickly. Work, evenings, the harbor, the quiet rhythm of two people getting to know each other. I began to imagine what would happen when the summer ended. Maybe I would stay. Maybe we would leave together. Maybe life would unfold in ways that made sense. 19-year-olds believe in those kinds of maybes. Near the end of August, something changed. Elisa grew quieter, still kind, still gentle, but distant. One evening, after we had walked down to the beach, she sat beside me for a long time without speaking. The wind moved softly through her hair. Finally, she said, "You should go home soon." I laughed a little. Summer's almost over anyway. That's not what I mean. I turned toward her. Her eyes looked different that night. Sad, but also certain. "You have a life waiting for you somewhere else," she said. "So do you." She shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "Not like you." I didn't understand. I thought maybe she had simply grown tired of the idea of us. People drift apart. That happens. A week later, I packed my bag and left the town. I didn't see her again. "Dad!" My son's voice pulled me back to the present. He was standing at the end of the dock, pointing toward a sea lion that had surfaced near one of the boats. "Look!" I walked down and stood beside him. The harbor was busier than it had been 20 years ago. Tourists, shops, new restaurants. But the old cafe was still there. I felt it before I even looked, that same narrow building. New paint, different sign, but unmistakably the same place. "Can we eat there?" my daughter asked. I nodded. "Yeah," I said quietly. "We can eat there." Inside, the cafe smelled like coffee and grilled bread. The layout was different. But the windows still faced the harbor. An older man stood behind the counter. Gray hair, broad shoulders that had probably spent years lifting things. I ordered sandwiches for the kids. When he handed me the receipt, I hesitated. "This place used to have a waitress named Elisa," I said. The man looked up. For a moment he studied my face. "You knew her?" he asked. "A long time ago," I said. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I remember Elisa. What happened to her?" I tried to keep my voice casual. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he wiped his hands on a towel and leaned lightly against the counter. "You didn't know?" he said. He watched me a little longer. "Elisa was sick that summer," he said calmly. "Cancer?" My stomach tightened. The word seemed to fall into the room like something heavy. "She came here because she wanted to spend one last season by the ocean," he continued. "She knew she didn't have much time." My mind struggled to keep up with what he was saying. "But she worked here every day," I said. "Not every day," he said. "Some days she was getting treatment in the city." The words landed slowly, like stones sinking through deep water. "She left town in September," he continued. "She passed away a few months later. For 20 years I had believed she simply walked away, lost interest, changed her mind. I had carried that quiet disappointment like a small bruise inside my chest. Now, suddenly, what I thought happened that summer had changed. She hadn't left because she stopped loving me. She had left because she loved me enough not to let me see her die. We finished lunch and stepped outside. The afternoon sun was dropping toward the horizon. My children ran ahead toward the beach, chasing gulls and shouting over the wind. I walked slowly along the harbor. The same docks, the same water. But the past felt different now, clearer, sadder. Some people enter your life for only a moment, not to stay, but to change you. I stood there watching the waves move against the rocks, thinking about the 19-year-old boy who had once believed the summer ended because a woman simply grew tired of him. I understood now that he had been wrong. Elisa had stayed exactly as long as she could. Before we left town that evening, I stopped once more at the cafe to thank the man behind the counter. He nodded and said something I didn't expect. I just remember, he said. There's one more thing. He disappeared briefly into the back room. When he returned, he placed a small envelope on the counter. She left this with me, he said. For you. I stared at it. My name was written across the front in handwriting I had not seen in 20 years. Why didn't you give it to me then? I asked quietly. He shrugged. She said to give it to you only if you came back. I didn't open the letter until we were driving away from the harbor. My children had fallen asleep in the back seat, their heads tilted gently toward each other. The road climbed slowly out of town. I pulled the car onto a quiet overlook and unfolded the paper. Her handwriting was steady. The message was short. If you're reading this, it means you came back. I hoped you would someday. I'm sorry I didn't tell you much about myself. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more of me. And most of all, please forgive me for leaving you the way I did. I thought it was for the best. Sometimes when you love someone, you don't want them to see you slip away. You don't want them to carry the sadness or the pain that comes with knowing you're about to lose someone you've just begun to cherish. Sometimes it feels kinder to step away before the roots grow too deep, before the goodbye becomes too difficult to bear. But there is one thing I was never sorry for. Those few months we spent together were the happiest months of my life. You made me feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. You reminded me that even someone like me, someone carrying what I was carrying, could still be loved. You gave me a gift I didn't think life would give me again. You gave me a chance to feel joy, to feel love, and for that I will always be grateful. Love, Alisa. As I folded the letter and looked out at the ocean one last time, I realized something that took me 20 years to understand. Some people are not meant to grow old with us. They come into our lives, change who we are, and then disappear before we know how to ask them to stay. And yet, even now, after all the years and all the life that followed, I know this much is true of every person I have loved. She is still the one I remember most, the one life allowed me to love only for a few months, and the one I never got to keep.